Hello, I'm ready, Maria. Good morning. How are you all doing? I'm on my third cup of coffee here in beautiful North Carolina. So I am excited to be in space with you all. My name is Tracy Wright, and I am the project lead for the Young Advocates Institute. And so today I get a chance to talk about um, a project that is near and dear to me. Um, a little bit about me. I am originally from a small community called Bossier City, Louisiana. And by way of school, I ended up here in North Carolina. And I actually interned at NC CASA, the coalition, in undergrad and went to graduate school and got invited back and have been back for the past 17 years. And so I am just super excited to be with you all this morning. Again, please ask as many questions as you would like. Let's use the chat because I'm hoping this is a space not only for sharing, but learning and collective brainstorming. And so I want to see if we can get the chat kind of moving. The Young Advocates Institute is really a project that centers the lived experiences of young people. And I love young people. Young people are my people. And so I want to hear from you all, understanding a lot of you all are advocates. When you think about working with young people, what is one thing that brings you joy about just getting the opportunity to interface with young people? So if you could kind of let me know that in the chat, that would be great to get some of that energy going.
And while folks are typing in, it looks like someone in the chat is also on their third cup of
Yes, John, I
coffee.
see. Yeah,
And
their expertise. Yeah. Mm, yeah. Giving it even small affirmations to make them feel like they belong. Absolutely. Fresh perspectives. Yes. They are honest. Oh yeah, video games. Yeah, well. Oh, well, John, for you, it is video games. For me, is sneakers. I'm a middle-aged sneakerhead. Like, yeah, I will buy them. They hurt my feet, but they give me so many cool points with young people. They're like, yo, Miss Tracy, you got them? I'm like, I do. I'm not going to be wearing them for long because they hurt my 42-year-old feet. But yeah, you think I'm cool? I can rock with that. Yeah. 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 Beautiful. Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Video games. Yeah. Their resilience, fresh perspectives. Thank you so much for delighting me in sharing your perspectives. So, a little bit about, the Young Advocates Institute. It was launched in 2012. Um, the process for it, actually, the thought process behind it actually started before then, but we were well underway in fully moving in from concept to actual institute. um, it is a summer camp. We've kind of thought back and forth about using the word summer camp because our camp is really centered on social justice, prevention, advocacy, leadership development. And so it is a summer camp slash learning institute training ground for 200 teenagers, guys, ages 13 through 17, from across North Carolina who descend upon a college campus for 4 days of robust training, um, peer education, national speakers, campus tours, team building. Again, I want to say, guys, 200 teenagers in a college dorm. 200 teenagers, 13 through 17. Imagine who you were when you were 13 to 17 on a college campus um 4 days. And so I say all that to say about the magnitude of what happens when you bring together that many personalities. Some young people have never been on a college campus before. In addition to the content and the things in which we're talking about, some folks have never had those conversations before. And at the end of the day, like the purpose of the Institute is to give young people a voice, the opportunity to share their lived experiences regarding various social justice issues and to help them to become a part of the solutions. And I think I do want to say that when I think about NC Casa as an organization and I think about how the Young Advocates Institute has been designed, it's imperative to know that the way that our coalition moves forward is understanding that in order to end sexual violence, all forms of gender based violence, we have to end racism and oppression. And we have to do those in partnership and in parallel. And that is why one of the reasons and why so much, a lot of our content at YI is centered on the lived experiences connected around social justice issues and also this prevention education piece around teaching young people around about sexual violence. And so not only do young people from across North Carolina get a chance to descend on a college campus for a weekend, but we have attempted to make sure that this is a space that is open to all, but they have access to learning about healthy behaviors, leadership, and they build relationships with their peers to build out their own niche in really creating safer communities across North Carolina.
And Tracy, there's a question in the chat box that asks, does the Institute address any past trauma at all for these kids?
Absolutely. I will say that in the beginning, the makeup of Young Advocates Institute kids in the early years when we first started out, the institute was made up of about 80% of young people who were already embedded in some system. And so those systems in um, that were extremely pronounced in those early years were in here in North Carolina were juvenile delinquency, gang intervention, and the biggest piece was child mental health agencies because um, around 2010, um, like a lot of states, mental health in our state really started to dissolve and was shifted out to private companies. And so it was a lot of lack of, it was an overabundance of a lot of responders right around. So a lot of our responders around child mental health. And so a lot of our kids came from the higher levels of group homes and had mental health diagnoses. And so I will say that that has always been our focus. We've always acknowledged those past traumas because those traumas impact how young people learn. And I will say those young people in years 1, 2, and 3, and a little bit of 4 had all 80% of them had already been seen, witnessed, or themselves been um exposed to the forms of gender-based violence. And so absolutely those past traumas have to be acknowledged in care. And that's why I say in the early years why I looked very different than what it does now, because everything was completely holistic in just approach. We didn't make the assumption that young people had sheets and toiletries to be able to come into a college dorm for 3 to 4 days, right? We didn't make any assumptions for those things. And so we provided all of those things. And we wanted to make sure that none of those things were barriers for participation. And I will also say that that also impacted who we actually targeted and thought about in building YI. We are a coalition just like you're a coalition. We're not camp people. And so we had to really reframe and rethink about like who are we inviting into this space. Also understanding that a lot of our local programs had similar offerings. And I think when you think about the totality of YI, the kids who've shown up for the past 10 years have been 99.9% from marginalized communities or BIPOC communities, hands down. It has, and I think that also speaks to our approach. Um, I will say in the first year of launching, I wrote for about $250,000 worth of funding. And my intent was I wanted the kids who some would call high risk. And for us, I wouldn't call them high risk. I always attempt to have a strength based approach to everything. And I'm also not going to I'm not have a judgment on a kid or label a kid. So I was like, no, they're not high risk, they're high promise, right? We have to help them, reach their promise. And so we never went through school systems because we wanted the kids who wouldn't be referred from their guidance counselor, who probably didn't even know their guidance counselor, right? To be able to have this opportunity, one, to come on a college campus, two, to learn about prevention, healthy behaviors, leadership, violence prevention. And so, we didn't get any money, right? Because folks were like, hey, we don't want to touch that at all. And so I think our approach really has been centering the most marginalized in approach in who shows up at YAI and how we kind of design programming from that day forward. Some of the successes to date, the Institute has trained a little bit over 1,800 students through 125 course offerings um, on social justice issues and leadership development theme content. Pre and post tests increase understanding around sexual assault, human trafficking, and skill set development by 80%. 50 participants, right, from that year one. Those high promise students in year one, when we didn't have any money, left the Institute as published authors. And there's the published authors was in the piece in our first book called Who Am I? And all it was young people's narrative about their stories and their lived experience. YI has been replicated in 2 states with 2 very different approaches, I would say. So, Young Advocates Institute South, out of the Mississippi Coalition Against Sexual Assault, is a day camp option. It doesn't have the residential piece. Residential pieces come with a whole lot of liabilities and a whole lot of different thought processes. And so Mississippi opted to take on the project, but also wanted to make sure and they did it in a day camp option, which is also extremely valuable. So students would be dropped off at the top of the day and picked up in the evening. And then there is another space in Arizona called the Young Advocates Institute Southwest. And the Young Advocates Institute Southwest takes all of the pieces of the big YI pieces for a 1 day offering. And so, I'll talk a little bit about this in a second about the advisory council who makes all the decisions about the Institute. And so, in consultation with Arizona, they opted to really build their capacity of their advisory council. And so not only do their advisory council think about, here are the things we're going to train on, but their advisory council actually leads all of their workshops during their 1 day offering. So that's, a major success for a project that didn't have any money. And, that was designed at the end of the day. I think about why I, in this regard, like I do my work every day as a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. And I just remember not my family not having access to resources. And I remember just all of the things that shaped my young adulthood. And once I became, an adult, I wanted to create something that was um so young people could know that it wasn't their fault and find resources in their community, right? And um I say that that's how it started. The day a kid showed up on a campus, it was never about me ever again, right? It was never about me ever again. We've also brought students um, into host focus groups. where they created the question. They were targeted. They were tasked with going into their peer groups to ask questions in the way that they were written. Um, and we took that data and that quantitative data and ended up making the content for YI, the agendas for YI, understanding these are the conversations we need to have. Since then, we've been able to get some funding, more stable funding from our North Carolina Council for Women, through some FIPSA allocations and youth involvement. Our young people and myself in adult ally space got a chance to go to the White House State of Women Summit and talk about our project a while ago. And I think the biggest thing that has really helped us is we have been able to get some corporate backing. We built a relationship with Auto Trader and got some money from Auto Trader and about a 5-year commitment from Auto Trader. And in 2019, we got $100,000 investment from the National Football League to move our project in a different way. So those are some of the really super exciting major successes to date about YI. Is there a question?
Hey, Tracy. Yeah, I got a question. When you're talking about some of these tough issues with youth, I'm curious to know what sort of ground rules you set, like what's said here stays here, stuff like that. And if people are disclosing really personal things, how you handle that in a group setting.
Absolutely. And so I think the thing about it is in putting together something like this, we have to have a lot of ground rules from registration, right? From the beginning. Parents have to, like everybody has to have informed consent about everything. Absolutely, right? And not only, and so when we are in space, we are on a college campus, right? Not only is it us on that college campus, we also have to have relationships with everybody on that college campus. So we have we have a sound relationship with every single counseling center that we've been a part on because they're partners with us in YI. And then they have staff who are from the counseling center on every campus we've ever been on. So those folks are there. In addition to, we also bring in our local program in whatever county we're in to also help us to hold space with young people. Of course, we've had multiple disclosures. Again, you got to think about the makeup of the young people that we're talking about. We are talking about really hard stuff. And every time it happens, when we tell young people, all we need is like 5 to 10 minutes of worth of framing. Here is what sexual violence is. I see and have seen kids process like, I knew it was wrong. I knew that touch was inappropriate. I knew it. I knew it. And then the process begins on, then that's when the disclosures start to happen. I think the other thing to understand is we also, not only do we have counseling, all of our staff, we have adult allies who we also train on preparing to come into YI. We also bring on 25 to 30 upperclassmen, graduate students to serve as camp counselors who we also train. And so the kids are really the focus of YI, like they're the center of it, but the heartbeat really is our camp counselors who we train on how to respond. We have a protocol on what to do around disclosures that everybody is fully aware of. And here's the thing, we learned that because we made a lot of mistakes in our formative years, about like just how to handle the magnitude of, just understanding the overwhelming trauma that young people have. And so I want to be very clear, I'm not even just talking about sexual violence. Like we're talking about disclosures on a number thing, right? A lot of things. Our young people have a full lived experience and need a lot of supports. And so we do our best to make sure that we think about those on the front end. and it starts before we move into YI. I say this, like, when we started YI in 2011-ish, 12-ish, our registration process was 5 pages. By the time we stopped paper registration in 2018, we were up to 20 pages because we had to know the full scale of who and profile of the young people who were showing up, right? Because we had to figure out how to manage, and we had to come up with internal processes and work with the university on managing meds, right? So it was just all of these things. And so that kind of process helps us to know who our students are. And the other thing about us is, I think, because sexual violence in some regard, it's still not talked about when you think about our young people being 99.9% marginalized BIPOC, that folks are thirsty to send their kids to the space to talk about things that are still hard to talk about, especially in the context in which how YI is designed, which leads me to talk a little bit about the 18. And so the 18 is our advisory council, and it's made up about 18 young people who make a commitment, a 2-year commitment, just to be in conversation with me. And those conversations lead to the content that shows up in YI. And so the practice that we have in place is love with accountability. And so I love you and I'm going to hold you accountable. And so these are the decision makers who make up YI. And I will say everything that we have been able to do, you all are going to get all the resources, a copy of our agendas, our facilitators guides, everything. A lot of the pieces that we've created today after this conversation has been created through a pop culture and hip hop culture framework. And so there are no traditional offerings on any agenda that you'll see. Everything is a hashtag. We, right here in North Carolina, we've thought about everything that's happened in our state. We've talked about, we actually had, oh my God, we have a t-shirt line that is rich and robust. We have taken our social cues from everything you've seen on popular culture. And so that is another thing that makes YI extremely rich. And we'll dive into that a little bit. Here is really, a really, really important piece on how our relationship is with the young people who are a part of, the process, from the attendees at YEI all the way to the advisory council to our college graduate students, right? Really, we really just don't. And I think YI really in the beginning, year one, really was in wrong one, right? I would say it was an adult conference that just had kids at it. And when we built relationships with young people who showed up, they were like, you got to change that. It can't be that. And so that is when we really, sat in the accountability of this and, apologize for me as an adult ally to, young people, and in moving this forward. Like, I apologize for that tokenism, manipulation in that regard. Like, no, I really do want you all to design this for your peers, right? Like, again, I'm hanging on to my youth by a thread at 42, is probably gone. But for me, and it's important for young people to make those decisions. And it's important for me to be in community with them, to make sure that I have a relationship with them that's really important and valuable to me. And so sometimes I'll want to make a decision and they're like, Miss Tracy, like, no, nobody asked for that. Right. And they're right. And I appreciate that. And for me, not only has that kind of accountability, making sure that everything is youth initiated, shifted, my youth work, right? My work with young people, but it's also helped me to think more clearly about, like, how I'm able to provide TA to coalitions and local programs. I mean, like, how to maintain that things need to be survivor initiated, right? And those decisions are important. And so our advisory council, they make all the decisions. They are consulted. I have tons of ideas on things I want to do, but those things won't happen unless we have consensus from our advisory council on if those things are the things that are needed for young people. And so, and that is a delicate, that I think that the relationship with young people for me, like for me, is extremely valuable. And it added a texture to my life that I didn't know that I needed. And I'm so grateful I got it. Mhm. Every year, here is a product of the Young Advocates Institute. Is each year the advisory council comes up with their own Bill of Rights. It's their own, it's written in their own language. It is the guide for how we're going to approach um, our work together, right, as an advisory council. And it is the energy that we um, put into that prep work before you come to YI. And it is all of these things are also the things that are reminders in the guiding principles for how we show up and share space with each other. No negative vibes. There's no I in team. These are things that are written by them, and each one of the advisory council members contribute to this. And then this is the guiding document that leads us through the institute, and this is created by young people for young people in the space. Any questions or thoughts?
I just like the Bill of Rights. I think outlining stuff like this is super important in a classroom or in an institute like this, and those are good, Tracy.
Yep, it's all their stuff. Like it's all their stuff. They just type it up. I don't even type it up. I'm like, hey, just it's time for your Bill of Rights. And these things are really important to them. So these are things that are created by them. Their guiding principles, and then I think the thing is when they are back in physicals, when they are in space with each other in their small groups, because the way that students move through the institute is they move through the institute in groups of 25 to 30, according to age. And attached to those groups are about 5 to 7 of those camp counselors. And then once they're, when they are meeting their group for the first time, they go over these things. And if there is anything missing for that group in that dynamic, they all, the participants also get a chance to contribute to this process as a guide for how they will show up and what they need, while they're in the actual physical institute. Yes, love with accountability. Absolutely. We are also featured in the book Love with Accountability about it's a love letter. Love with Accountability is a book written by Aisha Simmons. And so we're in that book. And it's a love letter to the Young Advocates Institute about its creation story. So we practice that. I love you, and I'm also going to hold you accountable, and also centering love. When we talk about love from the YI perspective, it really centers that bell hooks love, that love is an action, right? Love is social justice. When you want to nurture your own, you want the best for yourself and for someone else, right? So that's really how we have attempted to kind of to put that into practice for our young people. Yeah. And I told you all that our young people are brilliant and creative, and everything comes from popular culture. And so, in the year of when Black Panther came out, they renamed Wakanda to Wokeconda. And so they have a whole t-shirt line about Wakanda. Like I mentioned, young people move through the Institute in small groups. You can see this is the group of T'Challa. You can see our YAI participants. They had their tribal contribution, and culture, youth culture was Wakanda's verbatim. So this was this was in 2018. And so all of our work has taken its cues from popular culture. We have a t-shirt line that is named from a piece of verbiage from the rap group Migos. The Migos always say they're from North Georgia. And so North is spelled Nawf. We have a t-shirt line called North, and the North in YI land in Wakanda stands for never acting with fear. So that, I mean, our t-shirt line is legendary. We have studied a whole lot of pieces of, we have spent a whole lot of time talking about relationship goals. Like everything has been really built off popular culture and using the things that young people are consumers of as teachable moments. I will say we had a beautiful opportunity. This is Daisy, who has passed away, and she was a founding member of the organization Safe Bay, and was a survivor. And we got a chance to have Daisy come to YI in the year of Wakanda. And guys, I will say, like, we had been pushing and talking about sexual violence in multiple ways, but I will say the needle for us really moved when we had when our kids got a chance to interface with Daisy and hear her story in fullness and totality and vulnerability. And in the way that I know that it was so powerful is that at the end of the institute, right, all of these groups get some time to really come up with their short presentations, right, to really kind of like communicate in whatever creative way that they want to about what they've learned over the weekend for their parents. It's essentially a showcase. And it was just fascinating that out of all of our training options, all the things we talked about that year, every single one of those groups, so we're talking about 7, 8 groups of small groups, every single last one of them paid homage to what they learned with Safe Bay. And I think the thing that you have to think about this, because it was just fascinating being in the space about this vulnerability, and I got a chance to ask those questions and hear that survivor story. And we got a lot of critical kind of thought processes about it. And the folks were like, oh, well, they could have a lot of commentary on facilitation style. Well, I didn't like the way what they said, or they should have said this. And I'm like, yo, and for me as the adult, right, and the keeper of the space, talking to other young adults who were not like our attendees, and our parents who are also other adult allies who are in that space, I'm like, yo, we're not going to do that here. Do you see the needle that is being moved here? And the conversation wasn't for you. It was for them. Thereby, that's why it worked. And so really kind of just holding that space. And it changed our program. And it was the first time that, like, collectively we knew that our young people wanted to make changes around sexual violence in their communities. And that's what all their short presentations were about. I think the other major highlight that brings me a lot of joy about the Young Advocates Institute is the evaluation piece. Of course, we, have prevention staff, and we had in the early years a lot of the traditional measures in capturing what we were learning throughout this process. But one of the best decisions I made was to hire Sir Bruce Davis III, who is now a rising junior. Is he a junior? I think he's a junior in high school. No, senior. He's a rising senior in high school. A young African-American, pure Black boy genius to come on and be the lead evaluator for the Young Advocates Institute. So our staff spent a great amount of time teaching him all the concepts of evaluation. And along the way, we learned that he had an amazing gift of the arts. And so Bruce ended up creating original artistic pieces that had prompts on them that ended up being our evaluation. And it's been our evaluation for the past 3 years. This is an original Bruce Davis piece. This is Rosa Parks. And this was for a year in which we were correcting the history around Rosa Parks. We were really telling that she was a sexual violence advocate long before, her history as a movement leader. And so Bruce drew this by hand, and it had prompts on it, and it's how we captured what young people learned. It was just fascinating how much more we learned about young people by just using the arts as an opportunity. This was a conversation we talked about the arts and reference the Harlem Renaissance and the cultural influences of that time. And so Bruce drew this hand drawn, and of course, it had prompts on it on how the arts are a part of social justice movements and how your stories and dance and the totality of the arts should be a part of social justice movements. This was also one of my favorite ones. This was a conversation um, that was about the school to prison pipeline. And when I talked to Bruce about like his thought process on colors, he was like, it looks like a school in one regard, but the finished product, had bars. And so it was like the school to prison pipeline. And so this had, prompts on it as well too. I love Bruce. He's the best. A little bit about, what I knew then. Social media is a way to definitely, get out information about your youth work. It has to be consistent. 200 is an insane number. People have asked me for the past decade why 200. I have the slightest idea. And I think if I had to do it all over again, I would build the evaluation component first and then the ongoing piece too. The second, I mean, and when I talk about the ongoing piece of it, we have, one of the struggles that we still sit in about the institute is it's a lot of pressure on one weekend. And so our kids were, with that love and accountability, saying, hey, you've got to have this programming throughout all the year. And so building that is extremely valuable and vital in part of the first two steps. I would say build a community investment piece after year one. You've got to create, a youth-led task force, right? This is not a task I think that just adults should be doing. Like, it's got to be young people, and it's got to be young people who are interested, and those who are not interested, right? It has to be the full, spectrum of participation and reduce liabilities in multiple ways. Like I know more about liability than I would probably care to know and probably would have ever known by way of the Young Advocates Institute. But to identify and know all those things where they are, especially with the residential piece, right? That makes things that much more complex. And I think I've just made, again, a lot of, I'm hoping they are the right mistakes. And I would, coin a right mistake as any mistake you learn from, right? If you learn from it, then it was the right mistake. And I think just, to stay firm on everything possible. Questions? Let me know in the chat. Y'all still with me? Let me know in the chat. There we go. I'm here. There we go. So 2020 was, whew, as some of my kids, I'm like, describe why 2020 in one word. They're like trash. I'm like, yeah, pretty much. 2020 really, like everything else, caused us to pause. We did not go into a live YI space, and so we had to really rethink and reshift what we were really talking about. And we had to do that on a dime, right? We really had to do that on a dime to really say, okay, here, what do you want to know? How do we create some resemblance to what we did in person? And so we really had to lean in. I will say we had to lean in a lot into just giving a lot of space for young people to really talk about both pandemics, right? And so when I'm talking about both pandemics, I'm talking about COVID, and I'm talking about this pandemic of, you know, the pre-existing condition of like racism and oppression, and how those things were, I don't know, just further exposed over 2020. And young people just needed a lot of different spaces to kind of unpack that in multiple ways. And so, of course, we went with a virtual option. We recorded some of those things, and those things are on our website, on our YouTube page. But, we just had to spend a lot of time in mental health. We had, therapists come in for this space called the couch. And so we just unpacked, had a therapist talk about wellness. We had a lot of listening sessions where we just sat in space. We had an exercise called 8 minutes and 46 seconds, where we sat with the realities around the George Floyd case. This was the representation from, again, this was Bruce's interpretation of what he felt in watching, just this kind of expound and expand and riots and movement. And I have been sitting with this quite a bit for the past couple of days as we've all been moving through, the trial. But I thought this was pure brilliance around the interpretation. And 8 minutes and 46 seconds was one of the workshops that we offered. In 2020, we had a lot of conversations around good trouble, around community organizing. Our students want to know a whole lot about college prep. So we spend a lot of time talking about all of the things that impact survivorship as well too. We talked about misogyny. We talked about misogynoir and how that impacts Black and brown women. Just a lot of rich conversation. We talked about the privilege of language, and microaggressions and adultification. So really just a robust offering. And our institute actually, of course, it was smaller. We didn't have the same 200 numbers, but it was way more intimate, and we were able to do a lot more work. We had tracks. We had a rap lab track. We had a talk your ish reflection track. So, those were the things that were available. Massage noir. My southern twang is coming out, Margaret. I'm so sorry. But it's this new concept about misogyny and its direct impact on Black women. Right. And so we talked about that in the context of hip hop music, right? And all these varying pieces. And of course, we had to have care packages. You can see some of our contents of our care packages. All of these pieces, again, designed by Bruce. You got the mask, you got the NOF t-shirts for this year, you got flip-flops. That was an exciting offering, hand sanitizer, all those things. This is one piece that I am really excited about. We actually had a mixtape released late last year. And so one of the tracks of this year's Institute was a rap lab. And so I have a co-curator. His name is Dasan Ahanu. He is a Harvard Nasir Jones Nas hip hop fellow. He's a teacher at UNC Chapel Hill. And so he came in and he taught this class on how to use your voice in music. And so we had an all female identified cohort record their music about who they were, what their feelings were. You all will have the link to this letter, but I was so excited because I can't believe that and then I'm on like one of them, one of the opening pieces, and I'm like, oh God, I had to call my mom, like, I made it. I finally made it on a mixtape. So yeah, so I'm excited, and you can see all the references. We got Shirley Chisholm in the background, and it's just really, really cool. Our young people really thrive in that space. And so I'm super, super, super excited about that there's a mixtape out there on SoundCloud that has, the Young Advocates Institute students sharing their stories. And a couple of weeks ago, we just wrapped up collectively shooting the YI 10-year anniversary documentary. I'm so excited about that. I can't believe that we have a documentary. And so we shot over 6 weeks, and it is a collective of young people and families and adult supporters, by way of interviewing, who have come through YI and told their story about what the project meant to them. So I'm excited about that, and we are hoping to have a July release. So I'm super excited about that. Um, and the beautiful part about being able to do the documentary was we got a chance to do it with our NFL money, because it has way less parameters on what we can and we couldn't do. So I'm excited about the YI documentary. You can tell me, like, I'm tearing up a little bit. I can't believe, first of all, I can't believe my boss let me do it, but I'm really, really excited that it's there and it's young people's story. And of course, YI is soulful in its approach. So our kids are the cast is going back into the studio to record their soundtrack for their documentary, which I think is super cool and exciting. And we're going to put together some facilitators guides, because the point of it really is, for me, for a documentary, one is to celebrate a project that didn't have any money, that centers, Black and brown marginalized communities, because at the end of the day, there's tons of things out there that look like YI, right? They're hella expensive. But we're soulful, like everything, like we are a soulful experience. We let young people come in and be their most authentic selves, and we take care of them, and that is what brings me joy. And I think, I would be remiss in not telling, like, all the goodness about why I think the hardest, I got tons of stories, right? I have tons of stories. When I get older, I'll be, telling all of these stories about all these amazing young people I've met along my life. But, some of them have also been really hard. I think the defining piece of YI for me was year one. So can you imagine? I already told you I wrote for like $250,000 and got nothing. And so we got this space and we're trying to figure ourselves out. We're not clown people at all. We're just even surprised how we even reached the number 200, right? And so we're in space and we have a young lady who, runs away from the camp, right? And so for me, that was by far the hardest thing, probably one of the hardest things I've ever experienced in my professional career, because this young lady was referred to us from um, foster care family. And once we realized what was going on and what had happened, we did everything we knew to do. So we reach out to foster care family. They say that we're discontinuing services with her right now. I'm like, whoa. We call a caseworker. Oh, don't worry about it. Like, she runs away all the time. I'm like, yo, we call biological mom who is, in transition, is like, I can't figure out all this right now. And the hardest part about that was like nobody showed up for that kid, right, on her behalf. And so to be able to hold this space where young people are learning and thriving, and then you're all trying to hold the space, not saying that's what we were doing because we hadn't figured it all out then, but like holding this space and then also being in real time where you're watching a young person like slip through the cracks. Like it was one of those things that it forever changed me. And truth of the matter is, when once we left that first YI, I was like, I don't ever have to do this ever again. Like I was fine, I was at peace. It was really, really rough for me. After that, my body carried the trauma because it was just fascinating that that was happening, how all these systems had let this young person down who needed them. So I was very clear when I left, like, oh, I don't ever have to do that again. And I really did operate in that space for about a year. And it was about like close to a year later, I got a call and um someone's like, hey, are you doing that thing you did last year? I'm like, why I? Hell no. Like, no, for real. Like, you doing it? Like, no, I said, no, I gave you an affirmative no. Like, no consent to that. Right. And they were like, no, I really think you should think about it because you had a kid who was there. And before he was at your project, he had, some mental health struggles. And after he came to YI, he went and he completed high school and he's in college. And that, my friend, is the only reason why we are having this conversation 10 years later. Because initially, after year one, I was done. So if I'm giddy or overwhelmed about like looking at this marker that says YI10 documentary, it is because, and it is so many other stories that have shaped the Institute in that way. But I think that one for me is the most pronounced and profound one, and the one that sticks with me, all the time. It reminds me of how and why, it's a part of my why, right? I believe that we all need to know our why, and our why will guide us to wherever um we're supposed to be. And so that's my why, and it keeps me grounded and reminded about the care that I hope that I can, support for young people. What I know now is you can really build community in 72 hours, 72 to 96 hours. Again, I would say I still think that 200 is an insane number. Um, and I think that as we think about what's on the other side, like, a lot of folks talk about like, going back to normal. Normal wasn't really working for us, right? Before COVID, right? The last close to 383 days, right? That we've been in this space. Um, I think young people are going to lead us in a way now and later that we can't even imagine. And so my hope is for advocates alike to really figure out rest, reset, um, imagination, and joy. I also think that intergenerational work is vital in multiple ways. I know that, when I think about it, post where we are now, I think communication is, in some regards, may have like broken down because we have to acknowledge that we're all in active trauma, we're all grieving, right? And we're also trying to figure out ways to survive, right? Um, and I think I felt this. I kept this. What I know now in this, young people are pissed. Um, and I kept that because that is what I heard constantly, especially when we were in the midst of a lot of political conversations, right? And thought processes. Like they were pissed. They were pissed at adults for the decisions that, they're thinking about their inheritance. And I think we have to acknowledge that and give space for young people to be pissed about all of the things. Um, and I think sustainable programming for young people can't exist without accountability and vulnerability. I stand by that. It's been I would say, you know, the foundation of why um I apologize to young people all the time because just because I'm an adult, and just because they are young people doesn't mean that I have breath in my body, I can harm them. And so I think apologies, and a lot of people like, I wouldn't be apologizing to kids, but it has given me a lot of traction, support with them. And I also know the impact of apologies for young people. And in my mind, um I also want to be the adult. I hope that I can aspire to be the adult um who they know that they can trust, and who can be accountable and apologize when needed, and not only apologize, but hold all the steps of accountability, right? You have to acknowledge and apologize and make action, um not to harm, right? How do you stop those things? So yep, vulnerability. I again, art has to be included in all facets of programming. I think about just, some of the things I hear from young people. I don't know if everybody's going back to a traditional school offering. And how are we going to create like that emotional well-being and spaciousness for students who don't? Understanding that school hasn't always been a safe space for all young people. Um, I'm really interested in social enterprise. I think it has to become a consideration for our work, right? To really think about that hierarchy of needs. I think that is another amazing asset of YI is we think about all those things when our students come into our space through our traditional camp offering. Essentially, we have scholarships, but our fee is minimal. It's a commitment fee, and it's somewhere between $35 to $50. And if you don't have it, it's not a big deal at all. But when young people show up at the Institute, we provide everything they need to wear. If they need toiletries, they know where all those things are for them. All meals, all snacks, everything you wear the entire weekend, like we take care of them in that regard. We've always paid for the nicer dorms where there are no community showers. We pay for sheets and towels in each room, where there are like the private rooms, right? Just taking care of our students and trying to have reduce liability along the way. And so I think that social enterprise really has to be a part of those thought processes as well too, when you're talking about basic needs, because I think my dream, where I've been leaning into as of late a lot, is like, what would happen if you could give a teenager a job, right? And like a meaningful job, right? And pay them a living wage, and also give them access to any therapeutic interventions that they would identify that they need. I think mental health is going to be an ongoing part of our work, and especially with young people, because I think those are the folks who are carrying, all of the pandemics at one time. So yeah, that is all I have. I'm really interested to get a chance to talk to you, hear about your work. Let me know if you have any questions about, again, you're going to get all copies of all of the pieces of YI, questions, thoughts. And it's a good time to ask the questions because unfortunately, like all the historical knowledge is housed in my head.
While folks are thinking about it, Tracy, I'm wondering, like, what was the biggest challenge for you in 2020, transitioning it over into the virtual space with the pandemic, and like, kind of, what are your tips for the folks here at the webinar today, for how to make that pivot?
Oh, I think in 2020, I probably was the most anxious about what we were going to talk about and how to keep young people engaged. Like that, those, I mean, like it's already one thing because you want them to stay focused throughout the thing, but that was a little bit harder in 2020. We had to, and how do you keep, it's a lot of magic that happens, just like with your conferences and things of that nature. Like it's a lot of magic that happens when we're in place together. And so I think myself and the kids were like, yo, how we gonna replicate the magic of YI in the Zoom boxes? And so that was the hardest part. And so we had to just come up with a lot of different things. Like one thing we did was um we still had our talent show. Like you all will see on our agendas, but like I can train all day on and have all this content that is available to them. But by far, a staple at YI is the talent show. And so we were still able to do that. Like people got a chance to pre-record whatever they wanted to do, and it was put together in a showcase. So that was really useful and fascinating. We have a sit down dinner at our institute, which it is a new addition. It's one of those things that Auto Trader really made the investment into, where people get a chance to put on their fanciest, business casual, they dance and they, you know, it's probably the only meal that doesn't, that is like completely balanced, let me say that. And yeah, but we were still able to do that. Like this time we just did it differently. So we ended up buying Grubhub Postmates um Postmates gift cards, and we sent them out to kids. And there were some kids who were like, oh, I don't really feel comfortable going out into a restaurant, so we sent them just Visa gift cards, and they were able to like make a meal, and we all had a Zoom meal together. They loved that. I like, so really rethinking about like connectedness in that way. Yeah. So that was one thing I was really excited about. Yoga mats, sending yoga mats to folks. Margaret, yes.
Thanks, Tracy. And thank you so much for this conversation. I have really enjoyed listening to you speak of it. It makes me wish I could be there so much. But I have a question for you about prior to 2020, because, and I work for the Department of Public Safety in the School Safety Resource Center. And one of the issues that keeps coming up for us is um, safety for minors on college campuses, which is a huge issue for you guys. And you've given me some really great things to talk about when you referenced children's mental health agencies. And of course, we need to train our adults on how to respond to disclosures, how to identify child abuse. But what are there any other recommendations you would make with respect to making sure that our kids are safe when they're gathered together on college campuses?
Ooh, yes. Now that, I mean, that one is a hard one. It really is, right? So it is for us. We have just had a lot of thoughts on like internal practices for us, like when we're on a college campus, because um so our internal practices are like anybody who is an adult for us, like not just gets a statewide background check for us, right? Gets a complete like national one. That's the first one. Before we even go on, go into campus. I think that we also, for us, we have to take a little bit of understanding around what is safety, right? Because safety means a lot of things to a lot of different people. And that thought process behind it, right? Um, yeah, and I think the hardest part for us, like we're talking about 13 to 17-year-olds, who really want to push boundaries a whole lot. And so we spend a whole, because they're free, like their parents are gone and they're like, oh, we're going to do all these things. No. And so we have to have a lot of conversations with them on like, hey, we are like, they want a lot of different freedoms. Um, and we have to have a lot of dialogue with them while they're on space, because they do want to, oh, we want to do this, want to do this. I'm like, no, we really can't. We can't do that, because we're also talking about like 200 young people. And so for us as a small organization, that is a mighty, mighty task. And so I think that's the first thing. And I think, in the other part of my life, I do spend a lot of time on college campuses and with college age students, and they have a very different definition of what safety is. And so we do our best. I don't think we have it figured out yet. I really don't. But we try our best. Um we have a lot of adult allies who volunteer just to keep our students safe while they're in the dormitories. A lot of spaces for folks to tell their truth. And so we do, like, we've had students who have been in, at our camp, and they haven't been safe. They didn't feel safe with, who was in their room as their roommate, right? If they didn't come with a group. And so we would have to move them. And young people know, like, hey, you can come to us, you can talk about those things with us, and no judgment call on those things. We want you to be safe while you were here. We've had to remove students who didn't acknowledge and adhere to the safety and the regulations of the institute. And I think it's not just a matter of removing them, but also like talking to them about the accountability of like, hey, those things are um not okay. Like, you can't, because the heart, I think for me, the biggest kind of safety issue isn't the campus itself, it's how young people interface with each other around boundaries and bodily autonomy. Those have been our big, because you got boys and girls in these spaces, and you got hormones in these spaces.
Right.
And like, so we're like, hey, like, so those are the things that we have to have a lot of. Everybody who is in that space, who holds a leadership role, has to reinforce that all the time.
Thank you. You've given me some great ideas, and I just had to, everybody's off camera. I was like, she has to know that there are some humans out here. So I just wanted to show my face and say
No,
hello.
thank you. Thank you. Because that's the other part about it. People like, oh, so this is an all girls camp. No, 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 it's not. Right. So yeah, it's not. And we've struggled with all those things. Um we've struggled with those things because young people are smart, right? And so we got a whole staff, like we got 50 volunteers just walking the rooms, like, oh, we walking the floor, blah, 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 we walking the floor. Here's the thing, we do that, we can only do that to maybe midnight. And at that point, it's no problem until we finally realize, oh, they're napping. Which is exactly what they were doing.
Of course.
They were
yes.
napping. And then we're like, oh, everything's calm. They're doing great. And then there is this ruckus that happens. And they're like, hey, Miss Tracy, I need you to, around 3 a.m. That's when it was. Hey, Miss Tracy, we got some stuff going on. Oh, they're up. Oh, okay then. Right. Because so you have to think about, like, those are the things that may give me a lot of angst, right? And so those are the things we've been trying to figure out how to better respond to, because yeah, we all just collectively figured out, like, wait a minute, it's too quiet. And it was too quiet, and young people were asleep. And so then we also noticed that the fun part that we weren't invited to happens about from 3 to 6 a.m. And so figuring out how to respond to that. And I would say our college students are the folks who helped us figure that out, because they keep those kind of hours as well too.
Yeah, they need less sleep.
So, we had to figure out how to adjust that. So those were the things that we were, and that was a major blind spot for us. Major blind spot for us. We're like, oh yeah, we're walking the halls, we got shifts, all kinds of stuff. Didn't make any sense at all. Complete waste of time because they were napping. Great question. Other questions?
This is Angela. I'm curious, currently my involvement with youth is, the primary thing is I'm the co-chair for the youth involvement and PR through the Communities That Care. And I don't know if that goes out to your community, but monies in substance abuse prevention and trying to get youth involvement. So they've been refunded and they're trying to expand youth involvement and even adult involvement. But just that capacity building, but also you had spoke to not tokenizing youth. And I'm curious, because this is a newer community. I'm actually from another community and have been in this community for 3 years. And I've been in Colorado for a long time, but I'm curious if you could speak more to that as far as like just preparing adults and interacting with youth. I know I have my own perspective, but I'm actually wanting to maybe share this out with the facilitator later. So I'm curious if you could speak to that and your experience.
Oh, yes, that is a beautiful question. Thank you so much for lifting that up. I think our young people got a chance to be a part of this youth leads conversation that was put on by the now defunct Biden Foundation. And it was this series of like focus groups about what young people needed. And we were one of 15 sites. And I think the thing that sticks out to me from that document and from what my lived experience is, adults need their own spaces to talk about their biases that they have about young people before they start to work with them. That's been my lived experience, like, and I mean that wholeheartedly, because I think that in some spaces we got a lot of judgments on young people. Oh, they are spoiled. Oh, they have no respect. They're this, they're that. And my frame is hand raised, pick me. Who is raising them? You are. And they're like, oh, well, yeah, like we're not going to pass those judgments on young people, right? When we are the ones who who have taught them to speak, right, freely, right? And so like and young people don't respond well to judgment. Like that's why that is in the Bill of Rights. Like no judgment zones, like that is the crux of it. And I think that adults have to work out our own biases, and I think adults who work with young people around these issues also have to work out any traumas that they may have around the issue, because those things can manifest in what that relationship looks like. And active listening. And so when I say active listening, this is something I have to practice. I think sometimes when adults are interfacing with young people, they're like, and they're not listening to them. They're building their rebuttal, and not, because I do it all the time. Somebody asks me a question, I'm like, I heard the first part, but I stopped listening. And now I'm thinking about what I'm getting ready to tell you. And I think that is a major thing that I would hope that adults would be able to do with working with young people, and understand whatever they come to you about, those things are real. Their emotional wellness is vital. If you don't have no care or consideration about how they're feeling, their vibe, their energy, all of those things, don't work with them.
So I guess what I hear you saying is maybe I need to keep opening my mouth and speaking up when I hear that. And I think that's also great because there is also another suicide coalition that's trying to incorporate youth. And I could see that having a lot of trauma that would come up.
And I mean, it's just like working with anything. You also don't want I say this when we're talking about working with marginalized communities and all those things, like this is how tokenization happens, is when we put the emotional labor on them. And so like, we just have to sit in our own accountability and be reflective of that. Like, and don't, like, they are valuable in multiple ways. Their perspectives on things are, and their language. Like I tell them all the things that they're awoke about and they're concerned about. Like young people, empathy. Shit, I didn't learn that till at least had $100,000 worth of student loan debt. Like I didn't have those things, and they have those things. They're open. They're ready to talk about those things, and so I just you gotta listen to them and trust, like just like we trust survivors to be able to help them to figure out, what's healing like for them. Trust them to lead them that way. Whew, yeah. Another question that has come up about how do we handle these conversations virtually? I don't know. Like I'm struggling with that right now because um we're getting a lot of push to extend therapeutic services to young people with some COVID cares money. And when I tell you I am anxious and nervous about that. So yeah, and it's hard to, yeah, it's hard to figure out how to have the conversations without embarrassment, and what they need. And so we tried to make it as safe as possible, but that is very, very different in a virtual space. Thank you, Margaret, for joining us. Absolutely. And so I think it was harder to kind of hold that space for young people. Definitely, definitely harder with the pandemic. Really, really. Yep. And here's the thing. I think one way that changed, Maria, is those virtual sessions, very few people talked. But the chat at the end of the space was long and robust because, of that safety and that thought process about how to protect the space as much as possible.
That makes sense. And like the texting aspect of it, of being able to just put it all out there.
Yep, it really was. Like, here's the thing. I'm going to show you all what I saw. And keep in mind, we did this for 33 sessions over 3 weeks. This is all I saw the whole time. Like that, the arrows up. So say someone said, yeah, this is really hard. I'm struggling. Everybody in the chat did the upward, like the whole thing. That's all I saw for like 3 weeks. When someone would go in the chat, like that was, I'm agreeing with what was said above. And I'm like, for a woman, I had to stop. I'm like, what is that? They was like, oh, that means we agree. Oh, who knew? Tell me. Cause I'm like, what is going on in the chat? I let my age show with them all the time. And they're like, you so lame, but we appreciate you. That's really how they treat me. And I love them for it. I love them for it. And I'm grateful for them. I'm humbled to be able to do the work. Like, again, I don't have any kids, but I get a chance to be the auntie and a trusting adult to a whole host of kids. And I'm better for it. I'm a better advocate because of it. Um, I'm transparent with them. They know who I am through and through, struggles and all. Um, they ask me like, how are things going with your therapist? Because they're fascinated by it. That they know how I feel about self-care and wellness in that way. Um, and I think that, folks have asked me over the years, like, Tracy, like, what do you think the biggest thing that young people need? And I was like, well, I think that by the time they are of YI age, right? I think sometimes, I'm not going to say all the time, like sometimes it's late to kind of hold in healthy thought processes around yourself. I think you have to build that because young people's like self-esteem and thought processes about themselves are just so broken and so hard because, you're thinking about the age group we're talking about. We're talking about like 13 to 17-year-olds, that might be some end of middle school and the high school, from what I hear and what I know, right? Just about middle school is the first layer of hell. Like that is a hard time. Like, just the thought process of around like, social media and bullying and just all of these things, like all those things are real and they do impact young people in that way. And we have to be cautious and understanding of those things. And so, people always ask me, I was like, I wish that I could, I wish I could figure out a way to interface with them earlier, to really help them with these things earlier, because self-esteem and who they are, those are the biggest pieces that I feel like we help with YI. I got kids like, yo, I need you to believe in me. And I'm like, well, tell me more. You got that. What do you mean? Like, believe in me? That I can do what my dreams are. I'm like, yeah, I got you. Believe in me believe in me even when I make a mistake. Right. And I'm like, I can. Like those are the things that young people have asked in that space. And so that's why that understanding of self and that overwhelm that thought process about like self-esteem, self-worth, those are spaces that I really wish I could lean in a different way to help them, because it just shows up in a lot of ways with all the kids of YI, the kids who were embedded in some system and the kids who, have different kind of community and family supports.
Well, along those lines, Tracy, since we're about 4 minutes out, well, 3 minutes out from the top of the hour, I'm wondering what you want to leave folks with. What final thoughts would you like to share before we turn off our Zoom and go on about our days? What would you like to share with folks?
Oh, young people so brilliant and they're so great, and it's an honor to be able to work with them. And I hope that, you all just spend a little time thinking deeply about the young people in your lives and in your communities and your organizations who you want to help. Um, and again, I say profoundly, figure out the best practices for you to take care of yourself. Um, Rest, imagine, right? Imagine new ways of doing our work. Um, Again, we know normal wasn't working for everybody, and what side of history are our organizations and our work going to be on? Understand that Black and brown young people need us in a way that we can't even fully imagine. And when we are on the other side of this, we need to be prepared for the trauma and how to help and how to heal. And I think if we take this moment and sit in these moments of pause and all these practices that we have adapted over the last, close to 400 days since we've been in this space, hold on to those things so that we can be the best and the healthiest versions of ourselves to really help the young people in our lives. And remember, you already have everything you need to be great, so just do it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tracy, for those words of wisdom, for sharing all about the Institute. It was great to hear about. We've already started, seeing in the chat box, fantastic, energized, awesome information. So thank you for sharing your wisdom with us this morning/afternoon. For you, we really appreciate it. I want to thank you all for being here. And any questions that come up for you, please do feel free to reach out to Tracy. Send them to me. I can get them to Tracy. Connect with Tracy. I'm going to be sending up a follow-up email here shortly with all of the documents that Tracy mentioned, some links as well, Tracy's email address, which is also in the chat box. So keep an eye out for that. I'm also going to be including a link to a survey. Those are very helpful for us. Please do fill those out. I share that information with Tracy as well. So please do fill that link out when you see it in your email. We do have several webinars coming up for April that we hope to see you at. We do have a Spanish one coming up on April 7th, so next week at 1 p.m. as part of the Yo Soy Sam. It's a national effort. Agueda here at CICASA is going to be presenting that with René Lopez, who's at Domestic Safety Resource Center over in Lamar. The next day, we have part 1 of a 2-part series on rural sustainability. So that's going to be April 8th and April 22nd at 2 p.m. So keep an eye out for those in your inboxes and on our calendar. So we hope to see you again soon. Thank you again, Tracy. We really appreciate your time and your expertise, and we hope to see you all soon. Thanks, everyone.